Hi. All right, we've got that palindrome. That was kind of fun out of the way. So let's go on. Let's see what Dimitri Simon's going to tell all of the kids in the contest. They spent some time on that, and then Simon said, you kids are in for a treat today. A grand adventure. Congratulations to all of you for cracking the code and making it here today. And thank you to the chaperones, the great teachers that are with you. Simon clapped his hands, and so did everybody else. The large man looked around at all of them, smiling in no apparent rush to get the event started. Just 10 teams, he said. You know, I sent out 40 of those secret messages to schools all around the area. I thought maybe half those schools would crack the code and send a team. Shows what I know. I was off by a bunch. He laughed as if his miscalculation was the best joke of the day. All right, he said when his laughter had subsided. Let's take care of the paperwork part of the festivities, shall we? And then we can get the show on the road. Simon folded a piece of paper from his back pocket and smoothed it out. He pulled a folded piece of paper out from his back pocket and smoothed it out on the podium. Let's see if everybody made it. Who's from Brookfield Junior High? Those were the Brookfield Brains. Upon hearing their name, their teacher jumped from his chair, whooped as if they had already won the prize. He tried urging his students into showing some enthusiasm, but got nowhere. All three of them were embarrassed rocks. Simon laughed and said, All right, there's some spirit. Cross Street School, where are you? These were three boys. Winston had noticed earlier and dismissed them as goofballs. They spent their waiting time not chattering or strategizing, but wrestling and roughhousing until their teachers had to bark at them to sit down and keep quiet. Even now, the three boys all cupped their hands to their mouths and yelled, Here! At the top of their lungs, and then they collapsed into snickering. Their teacher got red-faced again and smacked the nearest one on the back of the head. Who had sent this group after a $50,000 prize? Simon read from his list again. DeMilla Academy. That was probably a private school. That explained the outfits. Two girls were wearing a starched white blouse and a stiff blue skirt, and the boy had a fancy white shirt and tie. They looked like they were on their way to cater a wedding. Their teacher, who stood up and acknowledged their presence with a grave nod, was wearing a three-piece suit. Where's the funeral? Mal whispered. Shh, Jake said, but he couldn't help laughing. Simon consulted his list again. Greater Oaks, Junior High. That was the all-girl team. We're here, said their frizzy-haired teacher. She started to stand, but then thought better of it. Then she realized the other teachers had stood, so maybe she should, too. She stood back up. We're here, she said again, and sat back down. She was a bundle of nervous energy. Her three students glanced at each other, and Winston could see them rolling their eyes. Despite the fact that every other team had simply said here when called upon, the woman accompanying the next team insisted on introducing herself and her three team members. I'm Marcy Noon, the vice principal of Kennedy Junior High, and these are the school's three very smart representatives, John Curran, Nicole Droskakis, and Martin Oberlander. The boy identified as John Curran said loudly, And we're gonna kick your butts, he said, smiling. There was an explosion of laughter in response as John's teacher, or vice principal, leaned over, her face darkened with anger. Her reprimands did nothing to wipe that broad, confident grin from his face. Dimitri Simon tapped the microphone in order to get everyone focused again. When the cacophony had died down, he said, So there's some competition for you all, I guess. Let's see. Lincoln Junior High. That was Rod Denham's team. He stood up, adjusted his sport coat, and announced heartily that the 6-time champions of the local math competition league were all present. Winston glanced at Mr. Garvey, who was wearing a sour expression. The Marin School was next, That was another private school, although they were not dressed in the same formal wear as Damilla students. "Good luck, everyone," said their teacher, a young man who might have been confused for a high school student. "We're looking forward to having fun puzzling with you all today." The next team was from New Easton, which was impressively far away. Their teacher introduced his students as Mr. Hoffman, Miss Wang, and Mr. Hurley. "And I'm Henry Horn, so I guess we are Team H." There was some good-natured laughter. After that was Winston's own school, Walter Fredericks Junior High. Mr. Garvey stood and said, "We're here and ready to win," and sat back down. Winston tried to look as determined as his teacher, but he doubted he was very intimidating. The last team was West Meadow Junior High, home of the eccentric Brendan Root. His team was led by the school's vice principal, a balding, genial man who introduced himself as Carl Lester. "Okay," said Simon, "I'm glad we're all here. I know you're anxious to get started, so let me tell you what's going to happen today. You are going to face 6 puzzles. The first team to send me the answers to all 6 will win $50,000 for their school." Now, everybody already knew what the prize was, but hearing Dimitri Simon say the number out loud added an extra degree of excitement. The room filled with the murmuring of kids wondering what their schools would do with that money. Winston could feel waves of urgency radiating off Mr. Garvey. Simon smiled at them. "I have a present for you all," he said. "Potato chips?" somebody in the crowd said to general laughter. Simon chuckled. "Maybe we'll get you some potato chips too, but right now I have something else." He gave a signal, and Simon's assistants began walking among the audience holding boxes. They were giving out something. "1 per team," said Simon. "Just take 1. A young man handed the present to Mr. Garvey. It was covered in protective bubble wrap. Mr. Garvey peeled this away and looked quizzically at what he'd uncovered. He handed it to Winston, Mal, and Jake bent in to see what it was. It was a small, handheld computer, a personal digital assistant maybe, but not quite as large as a paperback book. There was a small screen and a keyboard. A stubby gray antenna poked out the top. "Now you will need to keep this with you all day," said Simon. "This little device is going to be your best friend. It will tell you where you need to go next, and it's how you're going to send me the answers as you find them." Winston found the power button and turned the device on. The screen came to life with the sound of a short electronic tune, "Do-do-do-do-do," and then displayed the Simon Snack Foods logo. This blinked away after a moment and was replaced with the message, "The game has not yet begun." There was a flashing enter button under that, so Winston hit the enter key. The device thought about that for a moment, then returned with the same message. "The game has not yet begun." All around them was the diddly-doo-doo of the little computers starting up. Simon said over the noise, "You can turn them on if you want, but you won't get very far just yet. I want to explain a few things first, and then game control, that's us, will send out the information you need to get going." He turned to one of the people by his side and said, "I told you those sound effects were a bad idea." When the tweeting sound had died down, Simon said, "Okay, as you've all learned by now, the game has not yet begun. Here's what's going to happen. After I'm done talking, my people here will wait 5 or 6 minutes so you can all get back to your cars. Then they'll push the button or throw the switch or whatever it is they do. Anyway, they'll start the game. Then, when you turn on your device, you'll get that very annoying startup sound, and you'll see a menu of 6 pages. Each page will give you information about one of the puzzles. But aha! You'll soon discover that only the first page is unlocked. Solve that first puzzle, type in your answer, and you'll learn the location of the second puzzle. Solve that, and you'll get the directions to the third puzzle, and so on. Simon looked slyly at them. The sixth and final puzzle is a little bit different. You won't need to go anywhere to solve it. The only thing you'll find on that sixth page is a clue and the input box for sending us the answer. That's it. Someone had turned on the computer again, and there was that now familiar twiddling sound of starting it up. Everyone tittered restless laughter, and Simon rolled his eyes. I absolutely promise you the game is not going to start until I say so. You can turn those computers on and off all you want, but don't, Simon said, realizing he was inviting a chorus of twiddly-dees. The first team to send us all 6 answers wins the loot. It's exactly that simple. We'll send out a message to all the teams when that happens, and then we meet back here and have some hamburgers and hot dogs, and of course potato chips. And I'll give the winning team a big fat check. A murmur of excitement buzzed through the room. Winston ached for Simon to dismiss them so they could get going. Simon looked around the room. Are there any questions? There were always questions, and Winston found himself clutching the tabletop in exasperation as they were asked. What if nobody wins? Someone asked. Simon shook his head with a smile. Somebody's going to win, believe me. We made the puzzles challenging, but not impossible. And the prize, I think, is big enough that you guys are going to give it your all. Am I right? There was general agreement and a couple of hearty yeahs from around the room. Simon nodded his approval. Now, if aliens invade and suck out your brains, well, I guess I'll come up with something. But I'm willing to bet that someone's going to win without any extra hints or clues. Anything else? Then somebody had to ask if you had to answer all 6 puzzles to win, which Winston thought was the stupidest question in the history of the world. He slumped down in his chair. He could feel Jake and Mal buzzing with anxiety as well. Yes, you have to answer all 6 puzzles. Well, let's get going. But Simon answered that question patiently, and a couple of others besides. After that, the room filled with a tense silence. There were no more questions. The game could now begin. Simon smiled, drawing out the moment, and then he said, Okay, get back to your cars and check your computers in about 5 minutes. Good luck to all of you. He had to shout this last bit over the explosive din of dozens of people all scrambling for the exit at the same time. There was no reason to run, but it was hard not to get swept up in the excitement. The clock was ticking down, and the game was about to begin. All right, stay close, said Mr. Garvey. Office workers who had nothing to do with the contest threw themselves against the wall as a flood of kids suddenly filled the hallway. A businessman in a suit coming through the front doors was frozen in shock as a chaotic crowd rumbled toward him. He leaped to one side like a stuntman in an action movie and gawked in amazement at the passing riot. The kids and their teachers flooded out into the parking lot. Mr. Garvey said to Jake, Who is holding the mini computer? Turn that thing on. See if we get anything. Winston knew that only a couple of minutes had gone by, and the game would not have started yet. But he understood Mr. Garvey's impatience. Jake pressed the power button as they walked. Twiddly-dee-dee. Nothing. Same message as before, said Jake. They approached Mr. Garvey's blue car. As they waited for their teacher to unlock it, Rod Denham walked by them with his students. So, these are your boys, eh, Garvey? He had a politician's grin on his fleshy face. It was a smile you wear when you don't particularly like what you're smiling at. For Mr. Garvey for a moment looked like a small, tense dog, one who wasn't sure whether to run or fight back. But he instantly put on a similar smile and said, Logic was always your strong suit, Denham. Mr. Denham's grin only got wider. He looked at Winston and his friends. Good luck today, boys. You've got some serious competition out there. So do you, said Mal. Mr. Denham laughed. His students didn't. They were sizing up the competition, their arms crossed, their expressions carefully neutral. The three of them looked like they had nothing in common. They were a freckle-faced girl, a tall but overweight boy, and a second boy who, with his thick glasses and oily hair, was almost a cartoon version of a math nerd. But somehow they gave off the impression that they were a team, a real team, organized and well prepared, ready to work together as effortlessly as the gears in a clock. Winston hoped he and his friends looked half as serious. All right, said Mr. Denham. Let's go, people. His team climbed into Mr. Denham's car, which was nearly as long as a motorboat. Around them, in the parking lot, Winston could hear the sounds of people turning on their computers, hoping the game had started. Jake climbed into the passenger seat this time, so Winston and Mal got into the back. That man is very hard to take, said Mr. Garvey. Well, he's used to winning, said Jake. Mr. Garvey glanced at him, perhaps surprised by this observation. You're right, he is. How did you know? Well, I've seen baseball coaches with that same expression. Not just confidence, but... Yes, said their teacher. Certainty. He knows he's going to win. That wouldn't be so bad, except he does. All the time, and it drives me crazy. We can tell, Mal said in a low voice. If Mr. Garvey heard that last comment, he chose to ignore it. He said, Try that thing again, will you? Jake fiddled with the computer. Winston closed his eyes in an attempt to block out that opening sound effect. Hey, I got something new, Jake said. Mr. Garvey's hand tightened on the steering wheel. Read what it says. Where are we going first? Hang on, Jake said, pushing buttons. Okay, Puzzle 1 is at the Bernstein Space Museum. Oh, hey, we get in free when we show them this computer. Cool, said Mal. Mr. Garvey said, That's right nearby. I wish it would tell us where the other puzzles will be. I'd love to skip ahead and have a puzzle entirely to ourselves. Jake pressed the buttons. When you click the button for a second puzzle, it says you can't have it yet. Same for the others. You have to solve them in order, just like Dimitri Simon said. Their teacher shrugged. All right, then. Tune up those brains, gentlemen. We're on our way. He put the car into reverse and backed out of their parking spot. Immediately, there was a strange popping sound. Winston looked around but couldn't tell where it had come from. Mr. Garvey shifted gears and drove forward, and everyone became aware that something was wrong. The car was making a strange, struggling sound and felt slightly lopsided. The teacher turned out of the parking lot, perhaps hoping the car would miraculously heal itself. But the sound didn't go away, and he decided he couldn't ignore it. He pulled over by the side of the road, just 10 yards from the potato chip factory. As the other teams drove past, leaving them behind, Mr. Garvey got out of the car. Muttering, he walked around inspecting it, and then stopped as he saw something he did not like. Winston saw a look of unleashed horror on the math teacher's face. Jake opened the door and peered out to see what Mr. Garvey was looking at. You're not going to believe this, Jake said. We have a flat tire. And that's the end of chapter 4.